Good morning, Magic. I'm Gavin Verhey from Wizards of the Coast, and today I have on someone who is so excited to be here, and I am so excited to have them. It's like Mr. Kamigawa himself is here. A man who literally, when I had him on last year, we ended the episode, and he was like, all right, but when it's time for Kamigawa, have me back on the show. I'll have so much to say. And here we are. It's time for Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. Welcome to the show, Daniel Holt.
Hey, happy to be here. And I have so much to say about Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. Hey, Gavin, I'm the senior UX designer for Magic Tabletop. So I handle all the UX, frames, icons, and some game design at Wizards.
Yeah. Oh, man. What a long time coming for this set. I mean, I know I'm a huge Kamigawa fan. I played it back in the day. I've always loved the block. I know you're a huge fan, but give us a bit of background here. Like, you're known as the Kamigawa guy. How did this love affair with Kamigawa begin?
My love of Kamigawa really came from when I started playing Magic back in 2004. I think I got one draft of 5th Dawn in, and then it was, headlining into Kamigawa after that. And, when you're a teenager, you don't get new cards all the time. You just kind of shuffle up what you have, you build new decks. So me and my friends every weekend, we would just sit down and play like Kamigawa 8th edition, and we just see that same stuff over and over. So that's just all the nostalgia for me. I read the novels, I played the game. I was just so enfranchised, and it was a 3-block set as well. So we were just there the whole entire year, and a year for a teenager is a lifetime. So
right, so it's almost like it imprinted on you, right? I think about this a lot with people's first Magic sets. It's like it's the first set you played, it's always special. Like my first set was Invasion Block, and I remember exactly that stage of like, these are all the cards in the world. I didn't know that I could go read a magazine and learn what all the cards did. Whatever I opened in my packs, those are the cards that existed. And so right, it's just so special. And so Kamigawa for you was like, this is what's out there, and you're all playing it every week, and I mean that's a pretty special time. But it persisted, right? So you kept loving Kamigawa. What kept that alive? Why didn't you move on to some other set?
So, even back in the day when it was still in standard, I played through Ravnica block. I loved Cynic and Graft. I moved on back then too, but then I took a break from Magic, as most do, and then I came back, and probably around Origins, Khans of Tarkir, that era, that's when I came back. And my friends were getting me into something called Commander. I was like, yeah, you probably never heard of it. Yeah, that's for casual players. That's not really for me. I'm trying to be I was a standard player. I was a drafter. I was there every Friday night at F&M, prepping for a weekend tournament on Saturday. And I was like, whatever. But then I came to Wizards, and we're not allowed to play competitively anymore. So I kind of had to give up that hobby. And I saw a lot of people internally were playing Commander, and I'm sitting over here with I did build an 8.5 Tails deck at that point, and that was my only deck at the time, just looking back at Kamigawa. But then I was like, I want to keep building decks. Oh, how do I make this me? Commander is such a describe yourself through your deck format, and Kamigawa was there. I could use all those cards again, and I kind of set my own restriction of I only play with Kamigawa commanders.
You'll finally get a bunch of new Kamigawa commanders out of this set, so that opens up the pool for you a little bit. I mean, it's so cool to think Commander is so many things to so many different people, and for you it really was a way to express, hey, this is a set that I've always loved. I'm going to start playing with these old cards that I enjoyed, and, playing commanders that are off the beaten path a little bit.
Yeah. And, I got a lot more commanders with Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. And that was something me and Dave Humphrey sat down to do. I said, hey, I have this weird deck building restriction that only I probably do, but there aren't that many color pairs available. I had Yuriko and Okagachi and Kaseto being some 2-color pairs and a 5-color. I'm like, I need more color pairs. So, we sat down and we made sure we made some legends for those themes.
So you're a senior UX designer, but there's a lot more you did on the set than just UX, right?
So yeah, right from the beginning, I kind of snuck in there. I was like, hey, let's do Kamigawa. But then, after that took off, it was preliminary vision for world building. I did all the research with Emily Tang, reading all the short stories and novels. And then it was vision and set design for the main set, vision and set design for the commander set. Then it was helping build out the world with the world guide and the actual world building. I checked all the art with Zach Stella and Tom Gencott as it came in to make sure it was canonically correct with Kamigawa. And then I made the UX and frames and icons and all of that to go with it as well.
I think maybe in the history of Wizards, I've been there over 10 years now. I've seen a lot of sets come and go. I don't think there has ever been a person who has been involved as soup to nuts as you were with this set at every stage of the process. Because you were there at the very beginning, pushing to do Kamigawa. You were there in the design. You were there on the art side. You were there on the story side. You were like, make sure that the cards looked good in their frames at the very end of the process, right? Like literally everything, more or less, maybe not legal text or something, but like almost everything got touched by you at some point, which is amazing. I mean, this set coming out is like truly one of your love letters to the world.
Absolutely. And I think having that through line really helped me in all of those individual aspects, being able to tell world building, hey, the card design file is thinking this, and telling card design, hey, world building's leaning this direction. It really got to blend those two in a way that I sort of do with my role, because like I said, I'm on a few game design teams and technically the UX position, but this set really married it all together.
Well, let's talk about that. So there's a lot to dig into here. You're basically a full wealth of knowledge about all things Kamigawa. So let's just start where all good stories start, I suppose, at the very beginning. And that's talking about how it all started. So we're kicking off a new world. You're a big fan of Kamigawa. Just talk to me about like how you got your fingers in this pie and how it even started in the first place.
Yeah, so I'm technically on the world building team. So I'm in all those meetings. And day one at Wizards, I'm like, hey, let's go back to Kamigawa. I say that almost every day at Wizards. So much so that the creative leads are like, Daniel, if you say Kamigawa one more time, I'm gonna make sure we don't go back for another year. I'm like, okay, I'm still going to say it, but I message heard. So we're in a world crafting meeting where we have a gap in the schedule where I don't remember why we cut the plane that was there, but we just came out of 2 Innistrad sets that are dark and gloomy. We're going into S&C, Streets of New Capenna, dark and gloomy. We want something bright, colorful, hopeful. They said some other things, of upcoming sets we wanted to stay clear of. And I'm like, you just described Kamigawa, let's do that. And they're like, lukewarm on it. We're like, we'll see. I got a we'll see from Doug Beyer. And then, we started exploring one of the tropes that we wanted to hit, which was Japanese cyberpunk techie world, but we didn't call it Kamigawa. Exploratory design started exploring that concept. It was only later that they decided that, hey, this is going to be Kamigawa. Because, if we did that set here, we wouldn't get to do Kamigawa again for a while because they were so similar. And there has been 1,200 years since the original block that we could kind of adapt Kamigawa to be what we needed it to be while still making it feel like Kamigawa.
Yeah, that time gap was so crucial for making this work, right? Because it's like, hey, we can still have the trappings of the world, some stuff you recognize, but some of the stuff that didn't work as well the first time around, we can tone down a little bit, which I thought was a really great solution to kind of a tricky problem. And actually, miraculously, like the creative team all those years ago that decided it would be set in the past, well, it worked out well. So good work, I guess, creative team of 2003. So tell me about that discussion between doing Kamigawa and not doing Kamigawa, because I remember I was involved in it a little bit, kind of on the peripheries, but there's a huge contingent of people inside Wizards who are just like, Kamigawa is one of the greatest failures we've ever done. People really don't like it. The name is tainted, all that kind of stuff. And you had a scrappy young bunch of rebels who were like, no, I think we listen to the fans. I think we're ready for it. There's excitement around it. I think we could do it, and we could use this time gap to make it work, right? Because if you just say Kamigawa to somebody, the first thing they're going to think of is like, how are we going to make that work? It's the same old world that we had before, all the same problems. But when you start breaking it down a little bit, you're like, okay, maybe this could work. Maybe if we do this time gap stuff and we tweak some of the theming and we get more of these other more modern tropes, it could work. But like, how did that whole process go? Like, give me some of the inside details on that.
Yeah, like you said, there were tens of us in the building that were like, hey, let's go back really hardcore. But then there's, the other side of people that didn't want to return to based on previous set. We really wanted to make sure we avoided the things that were considered failures of the original set. We brought in cultural consultants this time. We made sure that the set was built on our normal standards of card design. That was 18 years ago in our time. We've learned a lot since then when designing Magic cards. So naturally, we knew a little more of what we were doing now. So combining that look at world building from a different perspective and now new fresh eyes of game design gave us a lot of confidence that we could do Kamigawa correctly this time. Early explorations with Dave and Mark on Vision, we started wanting to see what we wanted to bring back, what we wanted to make sure didn't come back. Going into set design, the first meeting of that with Dave, I made everyone draft Champions of Kamigawa just to get a feel for the set. I remember that was kind of hilarious. We brought over the world building lead and the art director, Zach Stella. And just we all sat down and drafted it. And I'm like, okay, there's our bar. And then that really like refreshed people's minds on what was fun about the set and what maybe didn't work as well. One thing I keep leaning on is Bushido just wasn't the best mechanic. It's a stat buffing mechanic, and that's it, kind of end of story. And we applied it generally to all the samurai. We didn't want to do that again. So now the samurai have a exalted variant where we had a lot more design space and ability suites that we could apply to that kind of effect.
Well, and the really clever thing about the exalted variant, we'll get into mechanics in a little bit, but it's that it also is backwards compatible, right? Like if you play your Bushido cards and your exalted trigger style cards together, well, hey, you attack with your one samurai who's got Bushido. Do you want to block him and have him get bigger, right? So it's cool that even though it's a different mechanic, it still kind of works back with that. And yeah, lots to talk about with mechanics. And we'll get there in just a moment. But so yeah, you said, beginning of set design, you draft Champions of Kamigawa. Where do you all start taking off from here, right? So, you're like, hey, okay, we're going to do Kamigawa. We've convinced people it's going to be this world. We're going to have a more modern update, maybe some of this futuristic stuff going on. Where did you start? Like, what were the first things that you did?
So exploratory design, which comes before vision and set design, I came in at the very beginning of vision. Exploratory design was still working with a set as if it wasn't going to be Kamigawa. So the very, very minimal structure of the set was set to be not Kamigawa. So once we found out it was, we got to go in there and, slap in a few mechanics that were returning and start flavoring. We started seeing some foxes and rats show up in the set. We just started kind of making it feel that way and trying to make sure that it reflected what Kamigawa is now. On the world building side, we actually had just decided that we had this tradition versus modernity conflict going on. So that led to our enchantment versus artifact theme, and we started overlaying that. And all the pieces just started falling into place, and we started building this elaborate world alongside the concept push that was happening for Kamigawa on the art side.
Yeah, I have to say, when I first saw the artifact versus enchantments theme, at first I was like, I don't get it, right? It doesn't feel like Kamigawa to me. There wasn't like an artifact or enchantment thing at all. But then once I began to understand, it was like tradition and modernity and how they were going to like be at odds with each other and how one was going to kind of depict the old world and the kami, one was going to depict the new stuff. It just made so much sense to me. I was like, oh, that's a really cool way of showing the old and the new and showing that we still have some of that old Kamigawa and there's some of the new Kamigawa in there as well. So I thought that was brilliant.
I think that's exactly why it was a perfect fit for the set. The old fans can lean more on the tradition side. If you miss your spirits and your just the more traditional side of things, play that, play your green white. But if you want the new cyber punky techie stuff, you got red blue over here doing that, and it's all overlaid with things you'll know. The moonfolk are in the technical side, but they're still moonfolk. Like, it still feels like Kamigawa.
All right, so let's talk about mechanics. We're here, let's do it. So some of the mechanics made it through to the final version of Kamigawa and Dynasty, and I kind of wanted to just hear the stories of those and why they were chosen. And we'll start with ninjutsu. So tell me about how we ended up with ninjutsu in the set.
Ninjutsu actually wasn't in the set to begin with. We modified, which was called upgraded in play testing, was pretty early adapted, and we knew we wanted ninjas. So we really wanted to see if we could get a different version of ninjutsu. It basically worked the same, but it kept all the modifications because we're like, we don't want you to suit up this creature. We're telling you to suit up creatures and then put it in your hand and lose all that work. But it turned out that the blue-black faction didn't really care about modifications as much as the other colors. So it kind of balanced out to work out in ninjutsu's favor. And, ninjutsu was really popular in original Kamigawa. With Modern Horizons 2 had a lot of success, and people just like ninjas, so it worked and made sense to bring back.
And plus the name ninjutsu is so powerful, right? Like, you calling it something else, it's like, no, it's ninjutsu. I remember being in a playtest and I gave Dave that exact feedback of like, I know what you're going for here, but the name ninjutsu, I want to use this thing. So I totally feel it. Okay, how about channel? So this is a Saviors of Kamigawa mechanic that we brought back here. It's a very broad mechanic. Why this set? Why channel now?
I think it was, it's another one of those mechanics that it works well, and it does reference the original Kamigawa. Again, we were a little limited on what made sense to bring back. Channel was one of those like card flow smoothing mechanics to where you have this big thing in your hand, you can't quite cast it yet, but it's not a dead card. You can pitch it for its channel ability. And then that really worked well with the lands, where if you drew your second legendary land, well, you can't play it, so you channel it for the ability. So it just started making a lot of sense with some of the legends and things like that.
Did you actually start with the lands and then kind of build out from there? Because you mentioned that the legendary lands is something that you thought about a lot with these cards.
I think we had channel in the set first. So we do a lot of cycles in the set as well. The lands we knew we wanted. So we designed the monocolor lands. I'm like, they should reference legendary creatures. They should feel like the old ones. And we played with a bunch of different abilities. And then I think Dave was the one that suggested, he was like, well, what if you draw 2 of these? Let's put channel on these. And we kind of tweaked the designs starting from that.
Okay, cool. So those are the mechanics that we're returning that made it in. I also want to give a moment of silence or a bit of chatter perhaps for some of the iconic Kamigawa mechanics that didn't make it. I'm kind of curious if you tried about them, if you talked about them, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, a big one to me that was core to the first block was Arcane, right? Arcane was everywhere. You would splice onto Arcane, you had Arcane triggers. Did you all try it for this set? And I know it didn't make it ultimately, but why didn't it make it? And what was kind of the thought there?
Yeah, so Arcane was one of those abilities that we tried, but it's so parasitic, meaning that it only works within this set. And we'd have to have such an ASFAN or number of cards in the set that had that to actually make sense for it to work. Similarly, like Samurai and Ninjas could be seen as parasitic if we just reference that. But, we do every ninja card that references ninjas also says rogues now. Every samurai says warrior. So we broaden those, and we just didn't have a good way to do Splice into Arcane.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, I love the broadening of samurai and warriors and ninjas and rogues, right? Because it's like, if you want to play all ninjas, you can, cool. And if you want to mix and match them, you totally can. Splice is so tricky to make work because, like as you said, it is parasitic, or you could try Splice onto instant and sorcery, but it's tough. It's a tough one to get there. Another one that was really iconic for me were all the spirits and Soul Shift. You all look at that at all?
So I forget when we decided it was Kamigawa. It's been a long time. We're getting old. But we knew Strixhaven was going to be spirit focused with the red white faction. I'm like, hey, we got Kamigawa coming. Should we tone this? Okay, no. We get to Innistrad. We got double Innistrad spirit tribes. Hey, Kamigawa's right after this. Y'all, let's slow down. We get to Kamigawa and it's like, well, we just did 3 sets in a row of spirits. We don't really have space for them in the set anyway, so they're there. They're shown in a lot of enchantments, a lot of spells. There are several spirits themselves. So the spirits are really well represented there, but just not in the form of Spirit Tribal and Soul Shift. That ASFAN, it wasn't capable. We put so many different returning creature types in the set that spirits just didn't get their shot.
I know I would have loved to Soul Shift back some Strixhaven spirits or something like that, but I understand it was not meant to be this time around. Maybe if this is a success, maybe Kamigawa 3, we'll see if we can tackle Soul Shift again. Soul Shift is also so hard to balance too, though, just because Soul Shift is either you draw a card when this dies or you don't. And it's that's a really hard thing to put on a million cards. Just I'm recurring the same cards over and over. It's very, very grindy, and it's tough to make good gameplay out of that. So, I understand the challenges. Okay, now let's talk about a couple things that are new to this set. That's some new technology that we brought in. The first one I want to talk about are Sagas. So we got Sagas here. Since we debuted Sagas in Dominaria, they've come back many times. Why Sagas, and why this implementation of Sagas where they flip over into creatures?
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. Sagas were great for the set. It's been 1,200 years. All the mortals are dead. So it's if we want to make callbacks, either they have to be immortals like spirits or random things that are still just sitting around like a building. That's not as fun. We did that on a few of the lands, but still. So the Sagas let us tell the stories. We have so much fiction. There's 21 short stories, 3 novels, all about Kamigawa in the past. And these Sagas let us reference those characters, and in a way that feels natural. The fans will be able to just pick up this card and be like, I remember that from 18 years ago. I know who Kiki-Jiki is. I know who Toshiro Nozawa is. And that was probably my favorite love letter to the set, was designing those Sagas and flavoring them. But then, their enchantments as well. That was a big theme of the artifacts versus enchantments of the set. And them being enchantments and sometimes creatures made a nice parallel with vehicles being sometimes creatures. So you do your chapters, you flip over, you become a creature, and you still are an enchantment. That was really important. We didn't want you to flip over and be a normal creature and your enchantment count be lower. So we designed this whole living historians telling the story and eventually becoming an enchantment creature to keep that count up.
But that's a really cool parallel, right? Because I guess I could ask you while we're here, vehicles. I mean, those didn't even exist in Magic last time we were here on the world. But this time they clearly make a lot more sense because of all the technology. So what drew you to vehicles? Was it just, hey, we want mechs? Or was there anything more nuanced than that?
There were certainly voices on the early team that said, hey, I want mechs. I'm more of a traditionalist myself. But so there were voices for that. You know, we had the Okiba gang became a Reckoner bike gang. So we had their cool motorcycles. And it kind of just made sense. You know, we really drove hard how many ways we could do artifacts and how many ways we could do enchantments. You know, along the same lines, we now have enchantment creature shrines, because shrines are back. They're now creatures, and equipment are creatures for the first time with the new reconfigure.
Yeah, so that's the last thing. Man, you're so good at segueing, Daniel. You're a pro. Reconfigure and modified. These kind of two probably go together in the same conversation, maybe, I don't know. But talk to me about these, because reconfigure is like nothing we've seen on Kamigawa before, and like Listids or Bestow is maybe the closest thing ever. And then modified is a whole new way of kind of looking at your cards. So yeah, talk to me about these.
So we really wanted to have a lot of creatures running around, because you can't really build a working deck if you have just a bunch of equipment, sagas, vehicles, auras sitting around. You're just going to get ran over by an aggro deck. So that was really the inspiration for making, you know, the sagas that turn into creatures and the equipment that are creatures that can then shift into equipment themselves. And it kind of worked with that technology thing of, I have this bracelet that magically becomes a spider.
Yeah, it looks like a pretty cool and interesting mechanic. So then how does that relate to modified? So, I mean, of course, it helps your modified stuff out, but how did modified come to be in the set? Did it precede reconfigure? Was it after reconfigure? What's the story of modified here?
I think reconfigure came a little later than modified, because modified was just such an easy category to grab with the theme of the set. You know, we knew we'd have equipment because of artifacts. We knew we'd have auras because of enchantments. And then +1/+1 counters are just evergreen thing that we always used. So that lumping of category just kind of made sense for the set. But then reconfigure just played into it. I think we ended up with a lot less auras in the set than original plan, but that was to, again, up the creature count with the other things laying around.
All right, so you've got your mechanics, you're designing, you're play testing, you're iterating, and so on. Just walk me through, like, you know, the rest of that process. Obviously, I say the rest, it's like 6 months of work or whatever. So it doesn't just happen in an instant. But, you know, what other things happened during this process in, you know, figuring out the mechanics, fine tuning the set, getting cycles in there? Like, what were some of the things that really stuck out to you as interesting pieces of this process as you went along?
Sagas was a big thing here to resolve, because, you know, we have DFC technology now, and that's ultimately what we ended up with. But we did test some single-faced options as well that kind of resembled flip cards and things like that from original Kamigawa. There's also, you know, just getting all the lore done. You know, we wanted to make these sagas, but they needed to tell a story. So some of the original design pitches, you know, maybe from some other team members that don't know Kamigawa as well, they would submit a design, and I'm like, hey, if you just change this one tiny thing, you're telling the story. And that's how we kind of made some of the sagas.
So talk to me about the cycles a little bit, because our first round of Kamigawa, there were a lot of cycles. Think of the dragons as a big cycle, think of the shoals as a big cycle, I think of the lands as a big cycle, like lots of cycles in that original block. There's also some cycles this time around. How did you pick and choose which elements you wanted to have cycles of?
Well, like you just said, there were a lot of cycles in the original set, and that was an easy way for us to call back to the original set as well. There are 6 new cycles in the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, all with a little twist. The lands we've already talked about. They were just an easy pick. Commander's very popular right now, so putting a legendary on the card was nice, and we didn't get to go with that main theme in the set like the original Kamigawa had. That is a sub-theme. You know, the dragons are super popular cards, so we wanted to do them again, but we wanted to give them a little twist. I think Ethan Flesher pitched that as a, let's have them have 2 choices when they die. So they're similar to their original forms, but they offer a little more variance there and options during the gameplay.
And the marches are based on the shoals, is that right?
The marches are originally called processions, and I continue to call them that. I cannot get that out of my head. They are based on the shoals, where the card you pitch doesn't define X like it used to in the shoals. Now it reduces that cost by X, or by 2.
So earlier, Daniel, you mentioned you worked not only on the main set, but also the commander decks, and the set booster cards go along with them. So we talked about the main set design and that trajectory. Talk to me about how the Commander deck started out, the themes you picked, the cards you started designing, what was kind of going on there?
Yeah, so early vision design for that with Chris Mooney, we wanted to see, just first steps was just picking a theme. One of the loudest and obvious ones would be Samurai versus Ninja. We knew we had 2 decks, that made sense for opposite color pairs as well. But the main set was starting to get so many Ninja and Samurai legends and just supporting those themes so loudly that we wanted to try something a little different and maybe support something that the main set isn't covering well enough for Commander players. And then naturally it led to that tech versus tradition side with vehicles versus upgrades. And then with that, it's blue-white versus red-green. So the color pair split pretty well there as well.
Yeah, and that really is like one of the core conflicts of the set, right? Is the tradition versus modernity. So it does make a lot of sense to me that you would kind of center the Commander decks around that. So the red-green deck has a bunch of modified stuff going on. Any cards you love in particular or stories from that deck's design?
Yeah, the secondary Commander, I forget its name, it's a giant boar spirit. It triggers off of putting auras on your opponent's creatures and goading them. We've tried to put that in a few products before. Just the idea has charmed several of us on the design teams of just enchanting your opponent's stuff and getting benefits from that. So I'm glad it finally hit a home here in the red-green upgrade deck.
Yeah, the making basically all of your auras vows is like a really compelling idea. I think we talked about that like all the way back on Commander 2018 or something. Like it's been rattling around for a long time. I'm so glad we got it out.
Warrior Commander too.
Yeah. It just comes up again. Like Modified, by the way. Modified has been tried in sets since Dominaria, Kaldheim, and now here. And one little mystery booster hint card as well. What about the blue-white deck? So any cards in there that you love or fun stories?
So with that deck, it's a lot of vehicles sitting around, so you have to figure out some way to win with that. So that was a nice challenge, and I'm really happy with where the deck landed there. But also, again, with the secondary Commander, that was our first time ever doing a vehicle as your commander, so I think that's pretty interesting design space.
I tried to beat you to it, Daniel. In Commander Legends 1, I made a Predator flagship that was a vehicle that could be your commander. I wanted to get through, but unfortunately did not make it through. I've got a video somewhere where I show off old playtest cards. You can see what the Predator looked like. But you beat me to it. Good work. So how about the set booster cards? So, the Myojin, for example, brand new cycle of those is really cool. What was the decision there?
Yeah, so I worked on set boosters with Corey Bowen, and we really wanted the Myojin in. We saw they weren't in the main set, and we're like, let's stick them here. We have a few slots. They ended up eating a lot of the slots of the set booster, but we were pretty happy to get them in. And we wanted to try new tech with the indestructible counter instead of the divinity counter, which it loses some flavor, but it saves so much text.
Right, that which was taken is like no longer a combo, but that was a long time ago anyway, right? So
1,200 years, give or take.
So what made you choose these abilities for the Myojin?
We wanted them to be impactful to Commander, even though they themselves can't be your commander for some power reasons. So they all still have their cast trigger, but when you do cast them, you are going to shape the game by removing that counter or just even threatening to remove the counter.
Now, did you talk about having them get the counter if they came into play cast from your command zone?
So we tested them coming out of the command zone a little, but they have pretty impactful abilities, and we didn't want that to reliably come up. I think it's a lot more exciting if you cast that from your hand out of nowhere and do the thing once without some other shenanigans, to get it back in your hand.
And that makes sense too, right? If every game was just, hey, I ramp till I have 8 mana, I play this, I make 21 ones at the end of someone's turn, it would feel a little repetitive. And also they reset so easily, right? You kill it, you cast it again, you do it all over again. I totally understand the challenges that kind of thing would have.
The blue Myojin specifically too, I think originally it copied anything. It wasn't just a permanent spell. So, getting that out there, and then next turn for free, you get to copy whatever 3 times. Like, it's still a very strong ability, but getting that every time out of the command zone is a lot less fun.
So, question I've got a lot is, what's up with this black legendary ninja that makes a toad when you cast enchantments and has a blue-green activated ability? Like, it's a frog ninja enchantment legend. Like, I'm sure this card has an awesome story. What happened here?
All right, so early on in set design, we really wanted to make sure we hit a Sultai ninja legend, because ninjas were starting to spread out of blue-black, primarily into green after that, and then there's the one random white one. But we wanted to give that a home. Like, if you really wanted to play all the ninjas together, you can. Some of them are even enchantments to trigger this creature's ability. But the design for the actual card itself, the trope of Toad Rider, came from our Japanese consultant Maki, who was on the team for a little while with Dave. He said this is a cool trope, and he also loved ninjas. Ninjutsu is one of the things he requested come back. And we took his design, we tweaked it a little, we made the final card, and it is what you see today.
That is so cool, right? And it was an idea that actually came from a cultural consultant of like, hey, you might not have thought of this, but this Toad Rider trope would be a really great fit. That's so awesome. I love that. It's really, really cool. Okay, another popular legendary creature asks. So we've got 2 Yamazakis in this set. Super cool, a throwback to Brothers Yamazaki from the first Kamigawa, but they don't have a partner. You can't play them together. Daniel, why didn't you put that on there? What gives?
Yeah, I knew the Yamazakis would come up. It was such an easy way to get some references in. Descendants are a thing that can happen. We have Satoru Umezawa, which is something I really pushed for. We had to have an Umezawa in the set. But we have the Yamazaki cousins as well. And the thing is, they don't see eye to eye. They used to be best friends in their childhood, but now they have completely different philosophies. One is more a peaceful poet. The other thinks the answer is, a little more force. And that the art by Magali kind of references that too. It's a full piece together, even though it's separate on 2 cards. And you can see that tension between the 2 cousins. So having partner didn't really make sense.
So yeah, okay, that makes sense. They are Yamazakis, but they're actually not working together. They're working against each other. Makes a lot more sense why they wouldn't have partner then. What about these 3-color legends? Like that's a thing that kind of came out of nowhere in this set. It's like, and now awesome 3-color legends. What was the impetus for that?
So with, the Mardu and the Sultai legends, those kind of pull together the creature type samurai and ninja. If you want to play most of the cards of that type, you need those colors. But again, the 3-color legends kind of came from that talk with Dave Humphreys I had, where we need more color pairs from the plane of Kamigawa for the people that want to build that deck. And so we tried to, broaden the spectrum a lot more in this set than, the original Kamigawa that only had 1 2-color legend in the whole set, and it's not the best at being your commander.
And then one more I just want to ask about. We've got a lot of cycles in the set, as you mentioned, but one new cycle that actually doesn't call back to the old stuff is the Invoke cycle, which are all 1 CCCC to cast. What made us do a heavy monocolored cycle here?
But Gavin, it does reference back to the old sets, just in a little clever way. Epic spells turned out to not be so fun when you cast one. But the idea of something epic is pretty sweet, always. That's a great word. So what we wanted here was we wanted to call back to the Myojin's powers that were referenced in those. They were all based on the 5 original monocolor Myojins. And we wanted a really heavy monocolor ability on those. A lot of the names changed. The flavor is still there. Invoke Despair, the flavor text mentions Night's Reach. And then the name Invoke the Winds is a clear callback to Myojin of Seeing Winds.
I see. Interesting. So they're actually calling back to the Myojin. That's so cool. I actually didn't know that. Thank you, Daniel. So we're about to wrap up, Daniel. We've talked about a lot of stuff today. There's so much cool stuff. I know I could keep you here for like 4 hours talking about it. If you out there listening want that, let me know in the comments down below. Maybe we'll bring back Daniel for rapid fire Kamigawa story time. But in the interim, one more thing, Daniel. Do you have a personal favorite card in the set? A card which is really meaningful to you, something that you really fought for, something that embodies the set? What is like the thing that you look at the set and you're like, that is my card, or that is a card I really love?
So my favorite card in the set is a little under the radar. His name is Goro Goro, Disciple of Ryusei. He is a tiny little goblin that worships the dragon Ryusei. I pitched this design when we didn't know the dragons were going to be reincarnated. So this goblin was a worshiper of Ryusei. It makes a 5/5 dragon to mimic the original size of Ryusei. But then the dragons were reborn. Atsushi, the new red dragon, is not a 5/5 or named Ryusei. I asked the creative, I was like, can we actually keep this? It's kind of funny that the Aki still thinks it's Ryusei. They rolled with it. The entire story of Goro Goro is that he runs around following Atsushi, worshiping in the name of Ryusei. And Atsushi just kind of tolerates it because Goro Goro gives them enough gifts that are of somewhat value that Atsushi just kind of tolerates it.
That's a delightful story. And I love just like how on the original world of Kamigawa, every single legend has like its own little mini story if you look closely enough and look at the name. So it truly is a storied world of legends and legendary creatures and even a bit of legends mattering. So amazing job, Daniel. This set looks spectacular. I cannot wait to go out and play it in person with friends. It's going to be so much fun. Thank you for coming on today. It has been a blast, and I'm sure we'll have you back again very, very soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And it's honestly so heartwarming to see the reception that Kamigawa has gotten from the fans.
Yeah, at this point, it's my hope we'll go back for a third round at Kamigawa, taking all the notes that people have given us and injecting those in for the third round. Although we'll have to wait and see, I guess, how it does. But fingers crossed, fingers crossed. Well, thank you all so much for watching, hanging out with us today. I'm going to have Daniel back on actually pretty soon for another episode talking about some other aspects of the set that we didn't quite get to here. So stay tuned for that. And I'll talk with you again then. But in the meantime, may you have a lot of fun with Kamigawa. You got this.
This card, I think, is actually probably going to be underrated initially. The fact that it just has flexibility early game as a counterspell or late game as a beater is pretty nice. And it's not like amazing or anything, but it's pretty weak. That thing is. The reconfigure stuff is nice. Yeah, nothing here. This is good. The Sky Storm Report is really good. If you have enough artifacts, and we've got a decent